I used to think that family was forever, especially when you'd given up everything to make sure they had a better life. When our parents died in a car accident, Madison was only 12. I was 31, struggling to pay off my own debts, barely holding on to a tiny rented apartment. But there was no question in my mind. I took her in. I became her guardian, her only family. I became mom, dad, and sister, all wrapped into one. There were nights I didn't eat so she could have a proper lunch at school. I worked extra shifts, cleaned houses, picked up every freelance gig I could find, just to keep her world stable. Madison grew up, smart and ambitious. She always said she would make it all worth it someday. When she got accepted into a prestigious private university, I took a deep breath and took out loans I could barely afford. $68,000, eventually creeping over $70,000 with interest. I didn't care. She deserved a chance. And for a while, it seemed like it was all paying off. Madison graduated with honors. She landed a marketing job. She started dating this guy, Grant, who came from old money, the kind of family that made their wealth generations ago and hid it behind perfectly ironed smiles. At first, I was thrilled for her. I thought, finally, after all the years of struggle, she's going to have a life I could only dream of. But then, little things started to change. She stopped calling as often. When I asked to meet Grant's family, she dodged the subject. At first, I told myself it was just nerves, or maybe they were still getting to know each other. But the truth started to surface in cruel little ways. Muted comments, strained silences. "Oh, it's just family-only events, Olivia, you understand." One night, I saw it plainly in her eyes. We met for coffee, something we hadn't done in months. She barely looked at me. She wore expensive clothes now, polished nails, talked with a softer accent she didn't grow up with. She smiled too much, that thin, fake smile people wear when they want to be anywhere else. And then she said it. "I just think for now, maybe it's better if we take a little space. Grant's family, they have certain expectations. It's complicated." Complicated. That word hit me like a slap. I had given her everything I had, everything. And now I was an inconvenience, embarrassing, an obstacle to her new fairy tale. I smiled, paid for the coffee, and said goodbye. She didn't even argue. She just nodded and left. She thought that was the end of it, but she had no idea what was coming. The drive home after that coffee meeting was a blur. The city lights swirled through the windshield like distant stars, and every street I turned onto felt unfamiliar. I replayed her words over and over. Space, expectations, complicated, no apology, no hesitation, just a clean break, like I was an old sweater she could toss out before company arrived. By the time I parked outside my small house, the one I had bought with 1,000 sacrifices and sleepless nights, the numbness wore off, and anger settled in. Not the loud, dramatic anger that burned out fast. No, this was something deeper, heavier, the kind that tightens around your chest and makes you sit there in the dark, staring at the steering wheel, realizing how foolish you've been. Inside, the house was quiet. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the old clock I kept by the door. I pulled out a file box from the closet. Receipts, loan agreements, wire transfers. I had kept every scrap of paper from the day I first paid Madison's tuition. Because when you grow up scraping by, you learn. Never let go of proof. Trembling hands shuffled through the papers until I found it. A simple contract I had made her sign before she left for college. At the time, it felt ridiculous. She was just a teenager. I thought she might even resent me for making her sign it. It wasn't a formal loan. It wasn't airtight. But it was something. In return for Olivia Turner providing financial support for tuition, Madison Turner agrees to repay the amount of $70,000 in the event that she chooses to sever familial ties without cause. Signed by both of us. Witnessed by a notary. Back then, it had felt like a silly formality, a way to teach her responsibility. I never imagined I would need it. But now, staring at Madison's familiar handwriting, I realized something chilling. She owed me. And if she wanted to erase me from her perfect new life, she could do it without my $70,000. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the sky shift from black to pale gray, making lists in my head. Options, risks, consequences. I wasn't a vindictive woman by nature. I never had been. But I was done being a doormat. By morning, I had a plan. First step. I would talk to a lawyer. Quietly, discreetly, without drama. Because if Madison wanted a life where I didn't exist, well, then she would get exactly that. Starting with the money that built her dreams. The lawyer's office was tucked between a dry cleaner and an insurance agency, an unimpressive strip mall barely holding on to the edges of town. It didn't matter to me. I wasn't looking for prestige. I was looking for someone who could tell me if I had a leg to stand on. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and tired coffee. A young receptionist with sympathetic eyes ushered me into a small room lined with battered law books. The lawyer, Mr. Calvin Price, was a man in his early 60s, gray hair combed neatly back, wearing a suit that had seen better days. But there was a sharpness to him I liked immediately, the kind of man who had seen too much to be easily impressed or fooled. I explained the situation in simple, careful terms. Madison, the college tuition, the signed agreement. I slid the document across the desk to him. He read it once, then again, tapping a pen absently against his notepad. "Well, Miss Turner," he said finally, "this isn't a formal loan contract, but it's not meaningless either. It's an agreement signed by two adults, witnessed and notarized. A judge might see it as a binding moral obligation, if not strictly financial. Context will matter a great deal." "So I can ask for the money back?" I asked, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. He nodded slowly. "You can certainly demand repayment. Whether or not she complies without a fight is another matter. If she refuses, you'd have to decide if you want to take it to court. There's risk, financial and emotional, and publicity. Small town like ours? Word travels." I sat back, the weight of it pressing down on my shoulders. He watched me quietly. "Can I be blunt?" I nodded. "This isn't about money, is it?" he asked. "Not really." I looked away, blinking hard. No, it wasn't. It was about being treated like trash after giving someone your whole life. About refusing to disappear quietly just because you weren't shiny enough for someone else's fairy tale. He didn't push. He just waited. Finally, I cleared my throat. "I don't want to humiliate her. I don't want revenge. I want her to know actions have consequences. That you don't climb over the people who built your foundation and expect them to stay silent." Mr. Price smiled faintly. "Then let's proceed carefully." We drafted a formal repayment request. Nothing loud. Nothing aggressive. Just a clear, respectful letter demanding repayment per the terms of our agreement to be delivered privately. I signed the letter with a steady hand. As I left the office, the late afternoon sun hit me squarely in the face. I stood there for a moment, letting it burn away the remnants of guilt clinging to my chest. I wasn't doing this to ruin her life. She had already chosen to erase me. Now it was simply time for me to stop making it so easy. The letter was delivered on a Thursday afternoon. By Friday morning, my phone was ringing off the hook. I ignored the first few calls. Madison's name flashing on my screen over and over, sometimes seconds apart, sometimes minutes. I let them all go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear whatever justifications or apologies she had rehearsed. Late that night, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw her standing there, trembling, arms crossed tightly over her designer coat, face blotchy and wild-eyed. I opened the door but didn't step aside. I didn't invite her in. For the first time in my life, I stood still, strong. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, thrusting the letter at me like it was poison. Her voice cracked with panic. "You can't be serious, Olivia." I said nothing. Let the silence stretch between us like a taut wire. "You're trying to ruin me," she hissed, lowering her voice in case the neighbors heard. "Grant's parents. They'll never accept me if they find out I'm being sued by my own sister." There it was. Not sorrow, not regret. Fear, but only for herself, for her image. I kept my voice calm. "I'm not suing you, Madison, yet. I'm requesting repayment, as agreed, quietly, privately." Tears welled up in her eyes. Real or fake, I couldn't tell anymore. "You're my family. You're supposed to support me." I nearly laughed. The bitterness tasted sharp on my tongue. "Funny," I said softly. "I thought family meant something to you. You made it clear it doesn't." Her lip trembled. She glanced back toward the driveway, where a sleek black car idled. Grant, waiting, probably too self-important to step out and face me himself. "They think you're some bitter, desperate woman," she snapped suddenly. "They think you're jealous because I got out and you didn't." I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "They can think whatever they want, Madison. You know the truth." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She looked smaller suddenly, shivering in the cold, stripped of all her borrowed glamour. "Pay me back," I said simply. "Or face the consequences. Your choice." I closed the door, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. Through the closed window, I watched her stomp back to the car, slamming the door behind her. The car peeled out of the driveway like a bat out of hell. I leaned against the doorframe and exhaled. This wasn't over. Not even close. It didn't take long for the next move to come. And this time, it wasn't Madison standing on my doorstep. 2 days after the confrontation, a sleek black town car pulled up to my house around noon. A tall man in a dark suit and expensive watch stepped out, carrying a slim leather briefcase. He moved with the slow, deliberate confidence of someone used to people listening when he spoke. He rang the doorbell once. I answered, keeping the security chain latched. "Miss Turner?" he asked, his voice smooth and professional. "Yes." "My name is Richard Alden. I represent the Caldwell family." Grant's family. Of course, he didn't ask to come in. He simply opened the briefcase and pulled out a folder, holding it up so I could see. "We would like to resolve this matter discreetly," he said. "Madison is engaged to Mr. Grant Caldwell. Their future, and the reputation of both families, is a delicate matter." I stared at him, unmoving. "I'm not interested in your reputation," I said. His lips tightened slightly. He wasn't used to being told no. "We are prepared to offer a settlement," he continued, slipping a paper through the gap in the door. $5,000. In exchange, you sign a non-disclosure agreement and drop all further claims against Madison Turner. $5,000. A tiny fraction of what I had sacrificed. A price tag on my silence. I didn't even need to read the paper. I knew what it said. Keep quiet, stay invisible, and let Madison's fairy tale roll on, uninterrupted by inconvenient truths. I slid the paper back through the crack in the door. "No deal." Richard's face hardened. "I advise you to think carefully. This could become very unpleasant for you." There it was, the real face behind the polished smiles. Threats dressed up as advice. "I'll take my chances," I said quietly, then closed the door in his face. Through the peephole, I watched him hesitate, then tuck the paper back into his briefcase and leave. That night, I sat by the window again, the old clock ticking steadily in the background. A dozen doubts gnawed at me. Memories of Madison as a child, clinging to me after nightmares, her graduation day, the proud smile I wore even though my bank account was empty. But then I remembered that girl at my door, sneering that her new family thought I was jealous. I remembered the cold dismissal in her voice. I had loved her fiercely. Still did, in some stubborn corner of my heart. But love didn't mean I had to let myself be trampled. By morning, I had my answer. I called Mr. Price. "It's time," I said. "File the lawsuit." Filing the lawsuit wasn't as simple as signing a few papers. It was a process, one that dragged my private pain into the open, one document at a time. Mr. Price filed the claim at the local courthouse. Within a week, Madison was officially served. She couldn't pretend anymore. No hushed negotiations, no quiet sweeping under the rug. It was real now. Public. At first, there was only silence. Then, around 10 o'clock one night, my phone buzzed with a message. "Madison, you're ruining everything. Please stop. You don't know what you're doing." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then set the phone down without answering. I had nothing left to say that she would hear. 2 days later, the real cracks began to show. A friend from church, Martha, who worked part-time at a catering company, caught me after service. "Olivia," she said gently, pulling me aside. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but there was a luncheon at the Caldwell estate last night. Big event. Madison and Grant were there. I braced myself. Martha lowered her voice. People were whispering about the lawsuit, about Madison hiding things from the Caldwells, about where she really came from. I felt my stomach twist. It wasn't cruelty. It was reality. In Grant's world, appearances were everything, and now Madison's spotless facade was cracking. Later that afternoon, while watering my plants on the porch, I saw Madison's car pull up again. This time, she didn't charge to the door. She sat behind the wheel, hands gripping the steering wheel like she was trying to squeeze the life out of it. I waited. Eventually, she got out, walking slowly, shoulders hunched, makeup smeared. I met her on the porch. No anger this time. Just a quiet, tired sadness. "I'm going to lose him," she said. No greeting. No apology. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I didn't matter," I replied. Her face crumpled. "You don't understand. His parents, they were never thrilled about me. They wanted him with someone more fitting. Someone with family connections, money, reputation." I said nothing. Let her spill it all out. I thought if I distanced myself, if I could just become who they wanted, they would finally accept me. Tears streamed down her cheeks now. I was so close, Olivia. So close. It broke my heart in some small, sad way. But it didn't change anything. "You chose them," I said gently. "And now you're living with that choice." She sank onto the porch step, burying her face in her hands. "I don't have $70,000, she whispered. "I don't even have $7,000. Grant was covering most of the wedding costs. I don't have anything of my own." I sat down across from her, feeling the weight of decades between us. "You made your bed, Madison," I said quietly. "Now you lie in it." The days that followed were eerily quiet. No more late-night texts. No more unexpected visits. Just silence, heavy and uneasy, like the air before a storm. I knew better than to trust it. Madison was never one to sit still when cornered. Sure enough, a week later, the phone call came. It wasn't Madison this time. It was Grant himself. "Miss Turner," he began, his tone clipped and cold. "I think we need to discuss what it is you really want." I leaned against the counter, keeping my voice even. "I want exactly what was agreed upon. Nothing more, nothing less." He gave a humorless chuckle. "You're hurting Madison. You realize that? She's falling apart." "She made her choices," I said simply. There was a pause, then the mask slipped. "You'll get nothing," he said, voice sharp. "No judge will side with you. You're wasting your time and dragging her through the mud for a few dollars you'll never see." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "You'd be surprised how persuasive the truth can be," I replied, and hung up. 2 days later, I heard from Martha again. Grant's family had called off the engagement party. "Postponed indefinitely," the society column said. Behind closed doors, the Caldwells were furious. A stain on their perfect narrative was unacceptable. I imagined the conversations Madison must be having. The cold smiles, the carefully chosen words, the subtle but unmistakable message, "You're not one of us." And I realized something. She had gambled everything, love, loyalty, even her own blood, for an illusion. And now it was crumbling. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table flipping through the lawsuit documents, I realized the final blow wasn't mine to deliver. Madison was doing that all by herself. The following morning, there was a knock at the door. This time, Madison looked different. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by jeans and an old sweater I recognized from years ago. Her face was pale, makeup-free, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen in a long, long time. "Can I come in?" she asked, voice small. I hesitated. Then I opened the door. She sat at the kitchen table across from me, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she barely sipped. "I talked to Grant," she said finally. "Or he talked to me. Told me it's better if we take time apart." She gave a hollow laugh. "We both know what that means." I said nothing. Let her fill the silence herself. "I have nothing left, Olivia," she whispered. "Nothing." I folded my hands in front of me. "You still have yourself. If you're willing to start over honestly." Tears slid down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. Madison sat at my kitchen table for a long time without speaking, staring into her untouched coffee like it might offer answers. Finally, she said, "I thought if I became something better, I could escape everything that made me feel small, poor, ordinary." Her voice was raw, stripped of its usual smoothness. I could see the little girl she once was, terrified of being left behind by a world that moved too fast, judged too harshly. "I was ashamed of you," she whispered, "ashamed of where we came from. I thought if I just tried hard enough, I could erase it all." It hurt. Of course it did. But deep inside, I had already made peace with the truth. Madison's shame wasn't really about me. It was about herself, her own deep-rooted fear that she wasn't enough. "You don't erase who you are by pretending it didn't exist," I said quietly. "You only lose yourself." She wiped her face roughly with the sleeve of her sweater. "I don't have anything to offer you, Olivia. No money, no fiancé, no future." I shook my head. "You're wrong," I said. "You still have choices. You can face this like an adult. You can start rebuilding your life. You can honor your debts, even if it takes you years." Madison looked up at me then, truly looked, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the sister I had raised. Battered, yes, but not beyond hope. "I want to make it right," she said. Her voice broke. "I don't know how, but I want to try." It would have been easy to say something cruel, to remind her of all the chances she had thrown away. But I wasn't here for vengeance. I wasn't here to watch her crawl. "You'll set up a repayment plan," I said steadily. "You'll sign it, and you'll stick to it, even if it takes you a decade." She nodded quickly, as if afraid I might change my mind. "And you'll get a job," I continued. "Any job. I don't care if it's waiting tables or stocking shelves. You'll stand on your own 2 feet for once." Tears slipped down her cheeks again, but this time, they weren't tears of manipulation or self-pity. They were real, cleansing. "I will," she whispered. We sat there for a long time, 2 women bound by blood, by mistakes, by a lifetime of hurt and sacrifice. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was a beginning. Madison showed up at my house again 3 days later, clutching a brown folder to her chest like it was a lifeline. Inside were the papers Mr. Price had drafted, a structured repayment agreement, modest but firm. She signed them without hesitation, her hand steady. No tears. No excuses. Just a quiet determination I hadn't seen in her before. "I got a job," she said, sliding the folder across the table to me. "At a diner. It's nothing glamorous, but it's steady." I nodded, feeling a complicated knot of emotions tightening in my chest. Pride, sadness, an old ache that might never fully leave. She pulled out a folded piece of paper from her pocket. A schedule. Early morning shifts, double shifts on weekends. She wasn't playing a part this time. She was working for it. "I'll send payments every month," she said. "Even if it's just a little at first. I'll do it." I believed her, not blindly, not foolishly. But I believed she wanted to be better. Not for appearances, not to impress anyone, but for herself. Later, after she left, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The lawsuit would be withdrawn once the first payment arrived. That had been part of the agreement. I wasn't interested in dragging her through court if she was willing to stand up and be accountable. For the first time in months, the air in the house felt lighter. Not joyous, not perfect, but lighter. I thought back to all the nights I had stayed up worrying about her future, sacrificing my own dreams so she could have hers. I thought about the betrayal, the hurt, the humiliation, and I realized something important. This wasn't about getting my money back anymore. It was about getting me back. The part of me that knew my worth wasn't measured by how useful or invisible I could make myself for others. 2 weeks later, I received Madison's first payment. A small check, but real, backed by real work. Along with it came a handwritten note. "I'm sorry, not just for the money, for forgetting who I was, for forgetting you. Thank you for making me face myself. I won't waste it this time." It wasn't everything. It didn't erase the past, but it was something. A beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. Life didn't change overnight. It never does. Not in the real world. Madison made her first few payments faithfully, small but steady, each accompanied by a short handwritten note. Sometimes just a simple, "Hope you're well," or "Thank you for giving me this chance." There were no grand gestures, no teary reunions, just slow, painstaking honesty, built one letter, one payment, one conversation at a time. She called once a week, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to. Short, awkward calls at first, filled with uncomfortable pauses and shallow updates. But over time, those calls deepened. She asked how I was doing. She listened. She didn't make excuses. I didn't open my arms and sweep the past away. Some wounds don't vanish because someone says they're sorry. But slowly, I found myself meeting her halfway. One Saturday morning, almost 6 months after the lawsuit was filed and then withdrawn, Madison knocked on my door again. Not to beg, not to apologize, but simply to visit. She brought coffee. Not from some upscale cafe, but from the corner diner where she worked. Cheap, strong, honest coffee. We sat on the porch together in silence, the spring air still cool, but filled with the scent of blooming lilacs. "I'm saving up," she said after a while, "for night classes, accounting. It's not glamorous, but it's a start." I smiled at that. A real smile this time. "A good start," I said. She sipped her coffee and looked out at the street, thoughtful. "I used to think life was about reaching some perfect place," she said quietly. "Now I think maybe it's just about trying to be better than you were yesterday." I didn't answer right away. I just let the truth of her words settle between us. It was never about being perfect. Not for me. Not for her. It was about showing up, owning your mistakes, building something real from the rubble. Madison still had a long way to go, and so did I. But for the first time, we were walking it as equals, not as savior and saved, not as idol and disappointment, but simply as two women who had finally learned how much strength it took to stand on your own and how much more it took to truly rebuild trust. I looked at her, then really looked, and saw not the polished image she had once chased, but a woman finally beginning to know herself. And I realized, quietly, peacefully, I had taken back more than just my $70,000. I had taken back myself. And in doing so, I had given both of us a chance at something far more valuable than money could ever buy. A future built on truth, respect, and hard-won grace. Not a fairy tale. Something better. Something real.